What if the way to a man's heart was never through his body, but through the parts of him he doesn't even know how to express? What if true emotional seduction meant becoming the mirror where he recognizes himself, perhaps for the first time? Many women have been taught that to be wanted they must be touched. Soft skin, a certain look, a seductive tone, all rehearsed as strategies for connection. But in reality, most men are starving for something they cannot name. Not touch, but reflection. Not sex, but security. Not performance, but presence. And you, who have lived long enough to know that physical closeness means nothing without emotional truth, you know the difference. You've seen the eyes that wander even when the body stays. You've felt the loneliness of lying next to someone who can't see you, or worse, who refuses to be seen. It's not because you weren't enough. It's because emotional intimacy isn't built by what you give with your body. It's built by what you awaken with your words. Let's name what you've probably sensed for years. A man becomes truly bonded, not when he's touched, but when he's understood. His nervous system doesn't relax because of your perfume. It settles when your presence tells him without words, "You're safe here. I see the man behind the mask." This video isn't about tricks or manipulation, it's about emotional fluency. Because when a woman learns to speak to a man's inner world, she doesn't chase, she chooses. She doesn't seduce, she awakens. And a man, once awakened like that, rarely forgets her. In this journey, we'll explore 5 powerful emotional messages that unlock something deeper than desire. We'll see how recognition, presence, curiosity, vision, and care shape not only your communication, but your emotional power. So let us begin with the first, the mirror that reflects a man's best self back to him, and why that reflection matters more than anything you could touch. There is a kind of woman who makes a man feel more like himself, not less. Not judged, not reduced, not instructed or repaired, but expanded. She does this not by offering advice, or by asking what he needs, but by holding up a mirror, clean, still, and affirming, to his emotional identity. And through that mirror, he sees his worth, his value, his effort, sometimes for the very first time. It can be something as subtle as a sentence. "I was thinking about how you always find solutions when things get tough." It's inspiring. This isn't flattery, this is recognition. And for a man, recognition hits somewhere deeper than desire ever could. You see, beneath the surface of masculinity lives a conditioning that few speak about. From childhood, many men are praised not for their feelings, but for their function. Be strong. Figure it out. Don't cry. They are rewarded for solving, fixing, enduring, not expressing. So what happens over time? A man begins to equate love with performance. And when he doesn't feel seen in his efforts, he often doesn't feel loved at all. Enter you, a woman who is no longer trying to be chosen but is finally choosing who is worthy of her emotional investment. When you speak to a man's core strength, not in service of your validation, but in recognition of his humanity, something profound happens. He relaxes. He connects. He begins to feel worthy, not for what he does, but for who he becomes in your presence. From a Freudian lens, this act of recognition strokes the ego, not in an artificial or inflated way, but in a developmental sense. You aren't feeding his pride. You're stabilizing his self-image. You're reinforcing an identity that might have been built on silence and self-doubt. As Freud might observe, the ego is not master in its own house. But when someone validates our reality, it becomes a little stronger, a little safer. This is why your words matter. They are not just communication, they are reinforcement. And emotional reinforcement, when offered consistently and sincerely, reshapes how someone experiences love. Imagine a man whose entire life has been about proving himself, and now he hears a woman say, "I see how you carry things. I notice the way you protect the people you love." That doesn't go unseen. In that moment, you've touched him more deeply than any caress ever could, because the wound of invisibility is one that even the most powerful men carry, and the gift of being seen, truly seen, is a form of intimacy that lingers in the psyche. There was once a woman, anonymous and ordinary on the outside, who said this kind of thing to the man she loved, not often, but at the right times. He wasn't expressive, nor romantic, but she had the wisdom to know his silence wasn't indifference. It was fear. Fear that his efforts meant nothing. So instead of demanding more from him, she began to reflect what was already good in him. And over time, he opened, he softened, he stayed. Freud would interpret this as a reconditioning of the masculine ego, a rewiring through consistent positive reinforcement. The woman didn't manipulate him with sweetness. She mirrored his value with sincerity, and the relationship transformed. Now ask yourself, are you offering praise only when it serves your emotional hunger, or are you offering it as a mirror to his unspoken efforts? Because when your words reflect not what you want, but who he is at his best, that's when love begins to breathe. From this mirror of recognition, we move to something even deeper, the place where anxiety dissolves and emotional intimacy begins. Some women try to win a man's heart by becoming unforgettable. Others, wiser, learn to become safe. Because what most men long for behind their confident eyes and independent posture is not a fantasy lover. It's a sanctuary, a space where they don't have to perform, protect, or pretend. A place where their guard can drop and they're still held. No matter what today brings, remember I'm here for you. At first glance, it may seem like a simple sentence, but its impact is anything but simple. To a nervous system trained by pressure, rejection, or performance-based love, this message lands like oxygen. It says, you don't have to earn me. You're allowed to just be. There is room here for all of you, even the tired, uncertain, or wounded parts. From a behavioral perspective, we are conditioned creatures, and many men, especially those who appear strong or emotionally closed off, have been deeply conditioned to hide their emotional needs. Love for them often came with expectations. Validation was rare, vulnerability was punished, and weakness intolerable. So they adapted. They became providers, protectors, planners, anything but vulnerable humans. But inside, behind that polished armor, lives a part of them that aches to rest. Not in silence, not in solitude, but in a presence that welcomes them, mess and all. You who have experienced what it's like to give and not receive, to hold space for others while never being held yourself. You understand the cost of emotional neglect, and in that understanding, you also hold the key to creating what many men have never had, a felt sense of emotional safety. Freud, always attentive to the unconscious, would likely suggest that the need for security traces back to the earliest bonds: mother, caregiver, environment. When a man doesn't internalize safety in childhood, he seeks it in adulthood, often through women. Not consciously, not even clearly, but subtly, through his attraction to women who soothe, not stir, his nervous system. This doesn't mean you should mother him. It means your words, your calm presence, and your emotional consistency become the signals his unconscious recognizes as home. When you say, I'm here, you're not coddling him. You're creating an environment where his defenses can relax and where intimacy can begin. True intimacy, after all, doesn't happen when two bodies meet. It happens when two nervous systems feel safe enough to stop protecting themselves. Consider this. A man who constantly needs space may not be cold. He may simply be terrified of being misunderstood, or worse, consumed. A man who doesn't express his feelings may not be emotionally unavailable. He may have never learned that his emotions have value. But when you offer consistent emotional safety, through words, tone, presence, something in him reorganizes. He begins to return, not because he needs you to fix him, but because he feels restored by you. There's a reason men open up at the most unexpected moments: after a crisis, during a long car ride, late at night when the world is quiet. These are not coincidences. They are moments when the environment finally feels safe enough. So imagine what happens when you become that environment. Not by sacrificing your boundaries, not by overgiving or proving your worth, but by simply communicating, you don't have to be perfect here, just present. This is not about making him dependent. It's about showing him that love doesn't have to be earned through performance, that he can stop auditioning for affection and start experiencing it. And what about you? You too deserve that safety. So this act of offering emotional haven isn't just for him. It's also a declaration of your own emotional clarity, that you are no longer trying to fix men. You are offering presence to those who are ready for it. Because a woman who provides safety without abandoning herself becomes unforgettable, not for her body but for her energy, not for how she looks, but for how she feels to be around. And now, from this place of safety, we travel to a different kind of connection, one that activates the intellect and nourishes the mind. There's a quiet kind of seduction that doesn't begin with a glance or a touch, but with a thought. It's when a woman enters not through a man's eyes, but through his mind. Some call it chemistry, others compatibility. But what truly ignites lasting connection is intellectual intimacy, a feeling that someone not only stimulates you, but expands you. You've likely seen it before. That subtle shift in a man's voice when he's intrigued, the light behind his eyes when he feels challenged, but safe. That rare moment where his guard drops, not from comfort, but from curiosity. And all it takes to spark that moment is something like this. I read an article about topic and thought of our conversation. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. It's a simple gesture, but it signals something deep. It says, I notice your mind. I value how you think. I'm not just here to be admired. I'm here to engage. In a world where many women have been conditioned to make themselves visually appealing, few have been encouraged to be intellectually present. But here's the truth. Men may chase bodies, but they stay for minds that challenge and nourish them. From a psychological standpoint, this is about reinforcement, but not of behavior, of identity. When you recognize and respond to a man's intellect, you're reinforcing his sense of self not just as a provider or protector, but as a thinker, a contributor, a man with ideas that matter. Freud would describe this as a deepening of the ego relationship. When a woman engages a man's intellect, she's not appealing to his instincts, she's appealing to his identity. She's saying, I see you, not just as a body or a role, but as a mind, and I like what I see. And this is not about pretending to be smarter than you are, or feigning interest in topics that bore you. It's about authentic engagement. It's about being curious, not performative. And most of all, it's about meeting him where he is mentally, not just emotionally or physically. Because when a man feels that his thoughts are heard, explored, and remembered, he begins to associate you with growth, with stimulation, with vitality. Think about it. How many relationships go cold not because love faded, but because curiosity died? Because the conversations became transactional, or worse, non-existent. Because no one asked, what are you thinking about lately? Or, what's been occupying your mind? There's a kind of loneliness that grows even in a shared bed, when minds no longer meet, and there's a kind of closeness that forms, even at a distance, when thoughts are exchanged, reflected, and respected. I once heard of a woman who sent her partner links to philosophy essays, psychology videos, and rare articles, not to impress him, but because she thought of him while reading. Sometimes he replied, sometimes he didn't, but over time, he began to open up. Not emotionally first, but intellectually. They developed a rhythm, a language, and in that space, emotional vulnerability followed. Because for many men, the safest way to connect is through the intellect. They are taught that feelings are messy, but thoughts are allowed. So when you start there, you build a bridge towards something deeper. Freud might say that such intellectual exchanges are not just signs of compatibility, they are sublimations. A way the psyche transforms desire into dialogue, where what cannot be touched or confessed can still be shared. So ask yourself, are you engaging his mind as often as you engage your longing for connection? Are you inviting him into conversations where his ideas, not just his emotions, have space? Because when a woman becomes intellectually nourishing, she becomes magnetic, not for her opinions alone, but for her willingness to see the man behind the mask of masculinity. From this spark of the mind, we move next into the power of future vision, not fantasy, but the emotional blueprint that builds commitment. There comes a moment in every relationship, whether spoken or silently felt, where the question surfaces, is this going anywhere? But before that question ever reaches the lips, it lives in gestures, tones, and subtle cues. It lives in the vision, because no matter how spontaneous love may appear on the surface, commitment is rarely built in the heat of the present. It's built through imagined tomorrows, the ones we speak aloud, even briefly, even casually. Imagine us exploring that place we talked about. Feels exciting, doesn't it? It's just a sentence, but what it activates in the mind is extraordinary. That sentence is a bridge from this moment to a shared horizon, from mere connection to possibility. It doesn't demand. It doesn't pressure. It invites. Because what most people crave in love is not just passion, but continuity, a feeling that this we might last. And for many men, that sense of emotional continuity isn't built through serious talks or dramatic declarations. It's built through these seemingly small but potent moments where you plant seeds of future life, shared laughter, new experiences. It tells him, without insisting, I see you in my future. Do you see me in yours? From a Freudian perspective, this act of verbalizing the future taps into one of the most powerful unconscious drives, wish fulfillment. As Freud theorized, our psyche is always weaving fantasy with reality, and the stories we imagine with someone can become psychic anchors. When a man hears you envision something joyful, relaxed, and shared, it awakens his inner world. And if that vision feels good, feels safe, feels real, he begins to internalize it. Now, this doesn't mean you should project a life onto someone who isn't showing up in the present. This isn't about illusion. It's about invitation. There is a significant difference between demanding clarity and inspiring it, and the latter often emerges through emotional artistry, the subtle, skillful language of foresight. You see, women are natural visionaries. Even before a relationship starts, many already imagine what kind of life it could become. But the emotionally mature woman doesn't impose that vision. She introduces it gently, with curiosity, not control. One day, I'd love to see the coast of Italy again. I wonder who I'll share that with. It's not a trap. It's not manipulation. It's a lighthouse, subtle, steady, calling in only those ready to sail that far. Because the truth is this: some men never build futures with women, not because they're afraid of love, but because no space was ever opened for it. No emotional invitation, no vision that sparked something beyond the moment. And other men? They're simply waiting to know, is this safe to dream into? Because many have been burned by rushed futures, forced roles, or expectations that crushed their sense of freedom. So when a woman gently evokes the future, not with anxiety but with playfulness, not with urgency but with warmth, it doesn't scare a man. It grounds him. It says, I don't need you to commit. I just want to see what this could become, if we both choose it. This kind of woman doesn't ask, where are we going? She says, wouldn't it be beautiful if we found ourselves there? And that shift, from pressure to possibility, is what allows intimacy to deepen. Remember, a future doesn't begin with a plan. It begins with a shared vision, a mental picture, emotionally charged, subtly reinforced. And the more that picture is evoked with warmth and sincerity, the more real it becomes. First in the imagination, then in reality. Because the mind doesn't distinguish sharply between what is felt and what is foreseen. If he can feel the life you imagine with him, he begins to emotionally rehearse it, whether he realizes it or not. Freud would say, where fantasy takes root, behavior often follows. Not because we're deluded, but because the unconscious seeks fulfillment of what feels emotionally safe and rewarding. So ask yourself, have you been hiding your visions of love out of fear of appearing needy? Have you silenced your dreams, waiting for a man to initiate them? Or are you willing to speak into the shared future, not to demand answers, but to light the way? Because a woman who invites a man to imagine, not just enjoy, becomes more than a lover. She becomes a partner in possibility. And from that future vision, we move to something more grounded, the small but powerful gesture that sustains connection, care without control. In a world that often rewards doing over feeling, most men move through their lives without being asked one simple question: how are you really? Not what's going on at work. Not, are we still on for tonight? Not even, did you sleep well? But this: how is your heart today? Now imagine receiving this message, unprompted. Just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling today. No agenda, no hidden need, no expectation of a response. Just presence, just care. This kind of message, deceptively small, touches a place most men never reveal, their emotional center, a place so rarely acknowledged that even they forget it exists. You see, many men are starving for emotional recognition, not because they are weak, but because they were raised inside a system that told them to suppress everything that made them human. Pain? Suppress it. Fear? Deny it. Tenderness? Distrust it. And so even as grown men, they learn to protect themselves by withdrawing, shutting down, or performing strength until no one asks anymore. But that doesn't mean the need disappears. It means the need goes underground. And when someone, especially a woman they care for, offers a moment of attuned emotional concern, it bypasses all the defenses and goes straight to the core. This is not about rescuing him. This is not about being his therapist or mother. This is about relational attunement, the delicate and powerful art of noticing. From a behavioral perspective, this is a kind of emotional reinforcement that has no demand embedded in it. You are not checking in because he's failing you or because you want him to give more. You are checking in because you value who he is, not just what he does. This act, consistent, gentle, and uncharged, communicates something most men never hear in words. Your emotional life matters. I'm not just here for what you provide, I'm here for who you are. Freud would recognize this as a corrective emotional experience, a new emotional pattern that quietly rewrites old scripts. Instead of emotional connection being tied to crises, withdrawal, or romantic tension, it becomes safe, continuous, and real. And when you check in like this, you're not only giving him space to reflect, you're modeling a new kind of emotional rhythm. One that says, we don't have to wait for problems to care. We can care in the quiet too, because let's be honest, many relationships collapse not from betrayal, but from emotional erosion. Little by little, the space between two people widens. One stops asking, the other stops offering. Silence replaces curiosity. Assumptions replace attention. But a check-in, a simple, timely question, has the power to interrupt that erosion. A woman once shared how she started doing this with her partner. Just a short message in the middle of the day. Not asking for anything, just noticing. At first, he didn't say much, but over time he began to respond, not with long paragraphs, but with honesty. And then one day he sent the same message to her. Hey, how are you feeling today? And that's the quiet power of emotional care. It teaches by example. You're not fixing, you're not saving. You're simply offering a moment of pause in a world that rushes past feeling. Because men, just like women, are deeply relational creatures, whether or not they know how to show it. And when you offer emotional check-ins without attachment or performance, you show him what love without control looks like. You show him what consistency feels like, what attentiveness feels like, what being emotionally seen feels like. This isn't about getting him to open up on your schedule. It's about creating a relational climate where opening up is possible. Freud would say, our emotional defenses are learned, which means they can also unlearn. And gentle, consistent care is one of the few forces strong enough to disarm the fear that lives beneath the masculine stoicism. So ask yourself, are you only reaching out when something feels wrong? Or are you offering care even in the stillness? Because love doesn't only speak in intensity. Sometimes it whispers. And in that whisper, something deep inside him remembers, I am not alone. From these 5 emotional messages, the mirror, the haven, the spark, the vision, the check-in, we arrive at a truth larger than romance, the art of emotional connection itself. There are women who wait to be chosen, and there are women who choose, not with desperation, but with discernment, not through touch, but through truth. And truth, when spoken into the emotional life of a man, is more seductive than any performance could ever be, because in the end, physical attraction fades, schedules shift, bodies change, but what stays, what binds, is emotional resonance, that mysterious, grounded, unshakable feeling. With you, I feel more human. Let's return to where we began, not touching his body, but touching something deeper, his need to feel seen, his unspoken fear of failure, his hunger for emotional safety, his curiosity, his dreams, his guarded heart. The messages we've explored are not strategies. They are acts of conscious presence, the mirror that reflects his strengths. I see the man you're trying to be, even when you can't see him yourself. The safe haven that holds him in uncertainty. You don't have to be perfect here, just real. The intellectual spark that says, your thoughts matter to me, not because I need to agree, but because they come from you. The shared vision that whispers, this could be more than a moment if we let it. The emotional check-in that affirms, you're not just here to give, you're here to feel, and I'm here to feel with you. When these messages come from a woman rooted in herself, a woman no longer performing, no longer begging, no longer pretending to be easy or low maintenance, they change everything. Because a man cannot attach to a body. He may desire it, but he bonds to meaning, to emotional reality, to presence. And what about you? You who have loved through disappointment, navigated silence, and reclaimed your own company. You are not just learning how to connect with men. You are redefining what connection means, on your terms. You are no longer seduced by attention. You are moved by emotional clarity. You no longer ask, "Does he want me?" You ask, "Does this nourish me?" Because emotional power is not in what you give endlessly. It's in what you offer deliberately. Freud, ever the interpreter of human behavior, might say that these moments, these words, these messages, are symbols, not grand or poetic, but effective. They shape behavior because they shape experience. And once a man experiences real emotional connection, his nervous system remembers it. His psyche stores it, and no shallow thrill compares. So what is the art of emotional connection? It is the decision to speak not from need, but from depth. To stop trying to prove yourself and start inviting intimacy, not through pressure but through presence. To lead with observation, curiosity, and sincere care. Because a woman who does this doesn't have to ask for attention. She becomes unforgettable, not for her body, but for the state of being she awakens. She doesn't manipulate, she doesn't chase, she doesn't plead. She speaks, calmly, clearly, and with conviction. And the right man, the man with the emotional maturity to meet her, doesn't run. He recognizes her. So now, I leave you with this. Which of these 5 messages resonated most with your truth? Which one will you carry into your next moment of connection, whether with a partner, a friend, or even with yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Speak from where you are, because your voice, your reflection, your insight, they matter. And if this stirred something in you, subscribe. There is more to say.